Now, this video deals with Act 5, Scene 8 of Macbeth in depth. Sometimes it can be slightly different than numbering of scenes in Act 5. But essentially, this is the scene in which Macduff confronts Macbeth and ultimately kills him. It's probably as much important for what happens and maybe the detail of why it happens as much as anything else. Coming into this, we've got to remember that, Macduff confronting Macbeth, from what we've seen so far in the play, you would think that there was only one winner of this. The beginning of the play deals with Macbeth as essentially the ultimate soldier. There seems to be virtually nothing that he can't achieve on the battlefield. And we have nothing really to suggest to us that Macduff is his match. So one of the central ideas behind this, obviously there's an answer to do with tragedy and the shape of the play, but within the world of the play, why does Macduff actually succeed? So the scene begins with Macbeth declaring to Macduff that he will not kill. Macbeth declaring, he will not kill himself. This is before Macduff has appeared, with this very interesting image. Why should I play the Roman fool and die on my own sword? And then following up with, while I see lives, the gashes do better on them. I would rather see wounds on other people than on myself. This is really very different from Macbeth, from the one who's about to be defeated. But then when Macbeth encounters Macduff, he does immediately try to dissuade him from fighting because of his guilt about what he's done to his family. So we still have that kind of conflict within Macbeth that we've seen throughout the play. They do fight. Macbeth breaks off to try and warn Macduff off again by telling him he's got a charmed life. Macduff reveals he was born by caesarean section and therefore not technically born. Macbeth realises the witches were toying with him, initially refuses to fight Macduff, but changes his mind when Macduff declares he will live in humiliation. They fight again. Macduff defeats and kills Macbeth. Okay, so hitting on the big issues, which we've always identified as the two central characters, Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, and then their relationship with each other, and the key ideas of the impact of the supernatural, the ambition and loyalty and the dichotomy between them, gender, particularly the idea of masculinity, and kingship. What makes a good king, or how are the particular kings within the play? For this one, even though obviously you might think kingship is at the heart of it because it's about the defeat of the whole king, the issues of what makes a good king aren't really at the heart of what goes on in the scene. To me, the key things are Macbeth, the supernatural, because obviously that's led him to his confidence in his position, and also potentially, in one interpretation we'll see in a minute, to give up his advantage. And definitely this idea of masculinity, being male. So if we start with the beginning bit, this is the beginning with Macbeth's reflections to begin with. As he said, why should I play the Roman fool and die on my own sword? It's not just that he's saying, why should I kill myself? This idea of playing the Roman fool, as well as seeing suicide as foolish, it's like when he was talking about Neptune. He's taking these grand ideas, these grandiose military, high level, but also very male ideas, and seeing his own version of this. That was seen as something that was honourable and very masculine back in for the Romans. And for Roman generals, the idea being, of course, that Roman generals who lost a battle were required to fall on their own sword. To dismiss that as foolishness shows a very different approach to masculinity, which is followed up with his point here. I would much rather, while I can see people alive, I would much rather see hurts on them I'd much rather see the blood on them. So that is very much his own version of what the manly thing to do, the masculine thing to be at the moment. It is to continue fighting and to fight to the end, rather than any sense of what the Romans might have described as honour. Now, a bit further down, we have this idea, get thee back, my soul is too much charged with blood of thine already. The contrast I identified just now, having had that very, very strong masculine idea, he then wants to back out. He doesn't want to fight Macduff because of the level of guilt he's got. Now, first of all, it does show that he realises the ridiculousness of that decision and the awfulness of that decision to kill his entire family. And it does show that the guilt is still there and still attached to the idea of blood and shedding blood. But it does give Macbeth a more human edge at the end. This is also in contrast to Macduff's response. You know, I've got nothing to say to you. My voice is in my sword, right? Everything I've got to say is in my actions. It's in what I can do with my sword. I think it partly fits the idea that Macduff isn't really an actual character of any great substance. He only exists for his purpose in the play. But it's interesting considering Macbeth has constantly talked about the idea of acting rather than talking. But then for me, the most interesting moment of this extract, and maybe even of the entire scene, is the first time they stop after fighting. Macbeth says, "Thou losest labour." Now, what does he mean here? He's about to introduce this idea that he will, he's going to win. Yeah, it's a waste of time, I'm going to win. And is that literally what thou losest labour is? You're wasting your hard work because I am going to win. That's possible. But I also wonder, coming up with this idea of Macduff and Macbeth and who should be winning, I almost wonder at times if he's saying to him, you are losing. You know, you are losing your ability to fight. You're getting worse, you're getting weaker. And then try and speculate against him. Is Macbeth doing... I mean, he is obviously trying to do what he did earlier and say my soul's too much charged with blood already. But again, is that the point that we've got? Okay. So, in this opening bit, what we can ask ourselves is Macbeth as ruthless as we have seen elsewhere? We've got the ruthlessness at the beginning, but this interaction with Macduff is something slightly different. And why is it Macduff's attitude towards is different? Is it purely this thing about his family? Is it because of the beware Macduff idea? Or is it a sense in himself that this is the wrong thing to do at this moment? Now, the second moment I've got here is after he has been told by Macduff what the problem is and why, you know, he basically was not born of woman. So let's look at the details of how this works. First of all, his initial response. Cursed be the tongue that tells me so, it's cow my better part of man. Right. Seems a fairly straightforward response, but it's that point about it has cowed my better part of man. I was just talking about this idea of masculinity in the previous moment. Here, straight away, this is a phrase that's almost similar to what, almost the same as what he said in the Banquo ghost scene, where he talked about, you know, challenging the idea of what a man should do, and then coming back to this sense that at the end, now I'm a man again, now that the ghost has gone. Is it also a recognition of what actually will end up with him losing? He's lost his belief. Is that what the better part of man is? Is he attaching his strength of belief and his understanding purely to what the witches have said? He follows it up with the comment that they should not be believed, because he realizes they're paltering with us, in a double sense, as he says, keeping the word of promise to our ears and breaking it to our hope. Now, let's consider that in a bit more detail. First of all, this is pretty much the first time he sees an issue with the witches and what the witches are doing. There was a little bit against them. He says he begins to doubt them after the Burnham Wood incident. But it seems that in both cases it is purely their prophecies turning out to not be true that cause him. He needs the actual proof before he feels that way. That he understands this idea of equivocation at this particular point. And that's what he means with paltering with us in a double sense, keeping the word of promise to our ear and breaking it to our hope. I think it's also worth considering that he's calling them juggling fiends, a sense of juggling being a trick, a skill that's just messing with you. I think it's an interesting phrase that he chooses to use it, the idea of juggling alongside there. But I think the most interesting thing to me is how similar this is to what Banquo says right at the beginning in Act 1, Scene 3, when he first comes to him after they find out he's Thane of Cawdor and turns to him and says, "Do you not want the same as me?" And Banquo then expresses these doubts. And so I think this shows a real idea of the problem that Macbeth has, is that he's taken this long to understand what Banquo did straight away. In Macduff's response, again, you know, it's very much the insults we got here. Okay, if you're not going to fight with me, that's fine. We'll just put you on display. I mean, he's taunting him. He knows it's not going to happen. But look at the language, coward. I mean, we've already seen how dare was the phrase that, the word that broke Macbeth in many ways when he was talking to Lady Macbeth. You know, what would he dare do? The idea of comparing him to monsters, again, along that. And then, of course, this idea of the tyrant that's come up all the way through, that's defined him through all the way through Act 5. But as though it's something to be gazed on. Now, if we look at those ideas, does that give us any more sense of Macduff as a person? Is he just taunting him? Is he looking down on him? Is he particularly thinking in terms of masculinity? He wants to look down on him. Okay? Yeah, if you won't fight me, you're a coward. You know, you're literally just a monster. You're not a proper human. You're a tyrant. Or is it just, again, there for a purpose to keep Macbeth going? Again, Macduff having no real image to himself. No real personality, I mean, to himself. Of course, this turns Macbeth's mind around, because there's no way he's going to do this. And again, we come back to this idea of masculinity that has been there throughout the play, and particularly there was at the beginning. I will not yield to kiss the ground before young Malcolm's feet and bait it with the rabble's curse. The reason he won't yield, according to that, is to be seen as something lesser than he is. He will fight to the end. And that's what he goes down to. Before my body, I throw my warlike shield. Now, this could well be a reference to imagery like, Shakespeare will be well aware of it, imagery like that of Spartans who talked about, who had this image of coming back on your shield when you're dead. But there's also the image of throwing your shield down in kind of defeat and acceptance. The idea that I will only throw it down before my body, or my warlike shield, whatever protects me, I will get rid of. It's a statement that really comes to the end and says everything that he's said up to this point, which is, I will fight until I am dead. And that's where he's come to. Now, that makes us have to pay more attention to the fact that he nearly didn't and didn't want to with Macduff, but it does allow him to finish the way that he needs to. So, the two things that come out of that, and I know it's been a lot of what I said there is kind of complex, but it comes this idea. First of all, what's Macbeth's reaction? Think about it in depth, and whether Macduff has a role any deeper than the Revenger. Now, this is the final for Macbeth. How has his character resolved in this final scene? That's what I would say to you. I would consider you to look really, I'd suggest to you to consider to look really closely at how this fits in with our expectations all the way along. Now, as a tragic figure, yes, he has to die. Interesting, he dies, generally it's suggested off stage. I mean, there are some ambiguities in some stage directions, but he dies off stage. Whether that's just because of the idea of cutting his head off, or whether it's another decision, I'm not sure. But is this the resolution we expect because he is the central figure of a tragedy and he has to pay for what he has done? Yes, is the answer to that. Has it fully resolved though? He has come to an understanding that what he did was wrong. But he always knew that what he did, and always accepted what he did was wrong to Duncan, that Duncan didn't deserve it. The understanding seems to have been the whole way through that what he did was unnecessary because it didn't really give him what he wanted. He never really gained from it. Less than any kind of moral idea behind it. And I think that's an interesting idea that Shakespeare plays with, less the idea of him discovering or realising the morality issue, but more realising the kind of pointlessness of it, and realising at the same time that he's not much of a king. And that goes down to that point of masculinity. How the sense of what makes a man affects the interaction of these two men and affects the ending, that it is a fight of masculinity, which maybe is why the head removal is so important here, like it was at the beginning of the play. And finally, we see what is the final impact that supernatural forces had. Were they the ones who betrayed Macbeth and brought him down? Or were they just impacting in terms of setting him off and letting him run earlier? It's a resolution that appears to have, well, just fulfill its function, but has a little bit more to it than that.